Hi, my name is Casey Doherty, and for my famous person in history speech, I decided to go in a little bit of an opposite direction and choose somebody who might not be as famous and you probably haven't heard of unless you're a big history nut. And the reason I chose this person is because of his story of how he had to overcome adversity to be able to do something great in his life that really impacted millions of people. The person I decided to choose that overcame adversity is King George VI. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, he's a king. He really doesn't have to overcome much adversity since he's born with a silver spoon in his mouth and has everything he could ever want from the day he was born. But the more I start to tell you about him, the more you're going to realize what type of adversity he had to overcome. So King George VI was born on December 14th, 1895. His full name is Albert Frederick known as Bertie to his close friends and family. As he was growing up, he was raised in the normal royal fashion, if you will. He had a lot of nannies and tutors, and he never really got to see his parents except for maybe once a week. And in this time, when he was with his nannies, they favored his older brother, Edward, more because he was in line to be the next king, and so they gave him more favorable treatment than Albert got. Through the strict nannies that he had, and then his father was very strict, he began to become very nervous around people, and he ended up developing a stammer. And this is a speech impediment where you start to stutter and run over your words a lot, and this would affect him into his adult years, and it really plagued him and really hurt him through most of his life. And the reason this is so important is because when he becomes king, the king was no longer really the authoritarian figure. They were more of a figurehead, and he was for the people, and he really represented the people well. And we'll get to that later. So his older brother, Edward VIII, was supposed to take over the throne. King George, or Albert, was very happy about this because he didn't want to be king. He didn't like getting in front of people, because the one time that he did get in front of people, his stammer absolutely ruined him and embarrassed him. He took him 10 minutes to say pretty much 4 words in front of Wembley Stadium, in front of all these people, in a national radio scenario, and it was awful. And he swore he was never going to be a public speaker and never going to speak in public ever again. So he was delighted when he knew his brother was going to be the king, and he didn't have to really worry about that. He had his other duties that he could take care of, that he was pleased just to have and didn't want much more than that. However, his brother Edward had other ideas. In the time of this in the early 1900s, if you remember the royal family, you had certain rules that you had to abide by, especially if you were the king who were going to be in power. Well, Edward fell in love with this woman named Wallis Simpson. She was an American. She was a very social person, but she was twice divorced. And in the church at that time, you could not marry a divorced woman. And it was one of the royal rules that if you were going to be king, you can't divorce and you can't marry anybody that has previously been divorced. So right after Edward had been coronated, he literally within a month, he goes up and says, I'm abdicating the throne, I'm going to marry Wallis Simpson. And it thrusted Albert into becoming king. And he refused, and then reluctantly he accepted and became the king of England. And this is where his stammer really began to show. He hated public speaking, he hated getting up in front of people, but he had gone to every specialist there was and all of the experts at the time, and none of them could help. He hated it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it until his wife sought out an orthodox method. And the man that was a speech expert, his name was Lionel Logue. He would go on to become one of King George's most trusted friends, and would stay by his side all the way throughout his life. But Lionel helped him gain his confidence through speaking, and really started to discover that it wasn't an actual impediment, it was more of a mental issue that was keeping him from speaking, and tried to help him overcome this. So at his coronation, he had to give a short little speech about just accepting the throne and had to recite some things, and Lionel Logue was there to help him out the entire time. King George overcame that really well, and even after that, he said, I don't really want to give more speeches, and so he was staying away from having to give public speeches. However, this was the worst time for him to ever do that, because it was on the verge of World War II with Germany, and at this time, the Munich Pact had just been broken. Germany just invaded Poland, and he was going to have to address the nation and give one of the most important speeches in the history of England. And in this speech, he would go on to give. He had Lionel by his side, and again, the stammer was so bad he even had trouble speaking over radio when nobody was watching. So to make him more comfortable, they taped off the room, made it as dark as could be to where it was just him. There was no light to show that he was even on radio, and he began to give his speech, and Lionel was there the whole time. And through this adversity that he was overcoming, his willingness to work through this adversity and the stammer that he had, he would go on to give one of the most rallying and important speeches of his entire life and declare war on Germany. And so King George, while he was nowhere near a good speaker, he hated speaking, he was awful at it, if we're being frank. He would go on to give one of the most important speeches the world needed at that time. And I think this shows us that by pushing through adversity, even if you're not good at something, you can go on to make an impact by doing that one thing you're not good at, by just pure willpower and trying to help and trying to really make yourself better at something. Thank you.